The alien girl crouched in the shadow of the broken starship, her breathing ragged and her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the 2 moons her people had abandoned her here after the crash. They said she was cursed that her bite carried death to any living alien who crossed her teeth. For even a second, she had been alone for 3 cycles, the wind tearing at her pale skin, and the night creatures howling around her. Her body trembled not from fear, but from the hunger that gnawed at her bones. She had eaten nothing for days. The dry desert offered nothing but sand and shards of metal. She thought this was the end until she saw the human walking across the dunes. He came with a strange, slow confidence, his boots sinking into the sand, his armor battered and worn. He carried no weapon in his hands, only a pack slung over one shoulder. She watched him through the shadows, her instincts screaming to stay hidden, yet something in the sense, something in the rhythm of his footsteps drew her closer. He did not smell like the others. He did not smell like death. He stopped near the broken hull of her starship and knelt to examine the scorch marks the desert wind tugged at his short, dark hair. He muttered to himself words she could barely understand, yet his tone was calm, curious, rather than fearful. Her body moved before her mind decided. She crept behind him, a whisper of movement across the sand, and hunger and instinct took over. Her jaw opened, and her sharp teeth sank into his shoulder. Hot blood filled her mouth, her body shivered at the taste. The human shouted and staggered, but did not fall. His hand shot to her arm, not in anger, but to steady himself. She waited for convulsions to collapse, the death that always came when she bit another living being. Her venom was instant, fatal to all alien bloodlines that had ever crossed her own. She had never bitten a human. Before she had expected him to die, she had wanted his life to feed her own, yet the human only stared at her his. Breathing sharp but steady. What was that? He said, his voice startled, but strong. Did you just bite me? She froze, her glowing eyes, wide as words, carried confusion, not hatred or fear. She waited for him to fall. But he only winced and touched the wound. Blood ran down his arm. But he did not collapse. The desert wind howled around them as she stumbled backward, terrified. I'm not dying, he said, almost laughing. What are you? She did not answer. She could not believe it. She tasted his blood again in her mouth, rich, warm, but harmless. She felt strength return to her limbs, not from venom, but from the nourishment of life. Her instincts screamed to run. Yet the human simply reached into his pack and pulled out a water flask. He tossed it toward her. She caught it, hesitated, then drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. You're starving, he said, his voice softening. He glanced at her sharp teeth and glowing eyes and at the broken starship. I guess you're the only one left, huh? She stared at him, unable to understand why he was not afraid. Every other living thing ran from her, even her own kind. He took a step closer, and she did not run. He smelled like warmth and strange earths, like metal and smoke, but not like death. Over the next hours, he stayed near her camp among the wreckage. He built a fire, something she had never seen before. The light and heat startled her, yet soothed her trembling bones. He shared food, strange dried things from his pack. She devoured them without shame. He did not flinch at her sharp teeth or the way her jaw stretched unnaturally. He only smiled faintly and said, careful, you might bite me again. She tilted her head, watching the firelight flicker across his face. Why did you not die? She whispered finally, her voice rough from disuse. He shrugged. Maybe because I'm human. Maybe your poison doesn't work on us. She stared at him. The first spark of hope she had felt in years. Her curse had ruled her life since birth. Every friend, every sibling, every alien who had touched her mouth had died. She had never known touch without death, and yet here he was breathing, laughing, bleeding, and alive. Over the next days, he stayed, teaching her words in his language, patching holes in his old armor, and helping her scavenge a wreck for salvage. He told her he was a wanderer, a scavenger of the desert who mapped the old crash sites for rare metals. He should have left her, but he did not. Instead, he learned her name, Lilith, and she learned his Jake. He taught her to drink water in small sips and how to wrap cloth around her feet to walk on the burning sand. One night, as the 2 moons rose, she sat beside him by the fire and watched the shadows of her sharp teeth flicker against the sand. Her chest ached with something new. He had been the first to survive her, bite the first to touch her, without dying, the first to look at her with something other than terror. She asked him once, are you not afraid of me? He looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Nah. He said, you saved my life when you could have finished me off, and besides, I like having someone around who can bite through armor if we get in trouble. She blinked, confused, until she realized he was teasing. She felt warmth in her chest and a strange tremor in her limbs, not from hunger, but from something she had no word for. She leaned closer that night, tasting his scent and hearing his steady heartbeat. She rested her head against his shoulder for the first time in her life. She touched another living being, without death following. Days later, when a patrol ship of her people returned scanning the desert for survivors, she stepped out from the wreckage. To meet them, their weapons rose. At once fear in her eyes, they remembered the cursed girl whose bite meant instant death. They shouted warnings as the human told him to flee, but he only wrapped an arm around her and shook his head. "She's with me," he said firm and loud. "She doesn't kill humans, she saved me." The aliens froze confusion and horror in their glowing eyes. The human led her to their ship calmly and said she was coming with him. If they wanted her to live, they would have to trust the only creature her venom could not kill. For the first time in her life, she felt free. She climbed aboard the ship with the human, knowing the desert, the wreck, the years of fear were behind her. She had found someone she could never harm, someone who had tasted her curse and survived, someone who made the cursed girl feel alive.